to Black Kids in Outer Space. Today, I am going back to Atlanta. I've been to Atlanta so many times. I am talking to Zahra. Zahra is a mother, organizer, creative, and adventurer. A project starting wandering, overlover, and outdoor junkie. Currently, she utilizes outdoor adventure, biking, growing food, yogaing, and curating spaces to bring people together. These community organizing efforts are used to enhance physical and mental wellness and economic vitality and environmental stewardship among Black people or Black folks. She sees biking as a tool for communal and individual transformation, as well as a means of building and rebuilding whole communities that are abundantly safe, confident, wealthy, and self-determining. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. That's why I usually cut people's bios short. I'm like, I don't need to know all that. But I felt like that was just so beautiful, like how you stated that and just how you describe yourself. Before we kind of jump into red, bike, and green, let's kind of jump into Zahra. I know that you're in Atlanta now, but you're from California and you're raised in Hawaii. So tell us about that and how did that impact your view, just your being, who you are?
Right. So I'm totally an island girl, which really translates well to the South. Slow pace, just folks being around you that are very communal, an appreciation for the outdoors, and just finding simplicity in the life that you live. And so I really work to find that in the South because that's what I got from Hawaii. The big thing missing from where I live now is that I don't have a huge body of water to go to escape to, and to live on. But other than that, the South provides a lot of what the island provided me with the addedness of like Black folks. So Hawaii is, yes, a people of color space, but not necessarily a Black space. Mm-hmm. So I get that added value here in Atlanta. And I think in general, though, Hawaii is just in my roots. I prefer not to have shoes on. I prefer to be close to the people that are close to me, that are like close in proximity to me. Mm-hmm. And I think of family and community as one of the same thing because of being raised in Hawaii. You got sugarcane fields and dirt roads, and in Hawaii, family is called ohana, and it's just everybody. Like everybody is looking out for you. My children, this weekend, we're at the Malcolm X Festival here in Atlanta, and I didn't have to go with them. I sent a text message, was like, my kids are coming up. Can y'all just keep eyes on them? And it reminds me of growing up in Hawaii because that's what it was. No matter where I went, because of its smallness, I always had eyes on me, and my mom didn't have to worry about me.
No, that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's, you could kind of tell, but I think that's the thing is so unique, I think, in a way about Atlanta, because you kind of have like this Southern kind of spiritual, like, I hate using the term neo soul, but that's kind of like this kind of neo soul, spiritual, like earth kind of feeling. Well, I mean, that's kind of the vibe I get. Now, I know something, I view you as, you're a Black woman, but you're a politically Black woman. That's what I kind of feel like. I'm going to put that label on you, but
I'll take it.
Take it. So, why do you think, that is? Was it something that was always with you, or was it something that happened when you went to Atlanta? What happened that made that a thing for you?
I think it was always with me. I had my first protest when I was in the 6th grade. I was actually in San Francisco, and it was after Rodney King was beaten, and we organized a walkout when the verdict came in, and I was in the 6th grade. And so when I look back, I'm like, I've been in activism work since I was 11, 12 years old, and just been a person that has always recognized injustice and has always voiced my opinion about it. And at some point it became part of my work. And then ultimately my lived experience was about ensuring that justice exists. And then I'm always being pushed to think about it in a new way. So I might have my own views, but I'm always open to new views about how we can become more progressive so that all Black people, and that's going to always be my center point, and really even more center is Black women and children. How can they be liberated in the context that we understand in the United States, but also how can we be liberated in our own minds and what liberation means for ourselves? Liberation is this word that gets thrown around, but I like, really, how do we feel free? And that can look a lot of different ways. And for me, at the age that I'm at now with 2 children, it looks a lot different than it did when I was 23, when I was 21, even when I was 18. But it's now at this point, it's about walking in my values, walking in principle, and making sure my politics and the way that I live align as much as possible.
You know, it's so funny. I was going to ask you, what is liberation? But you already answered that question, so I don't have to ask it. 'Cause I mean, I think that's I think that's something that we've always, you know, Black people, we've always kind of been searching for. Like, how can we truly be liberated? Like, you can get your degree and things, but you're still kind of like, am I liberated? I have to still ask this person who's my boss for permission in order to like even speak to certain people. So I know that you started the Red Bike and Green chapter in Atlanta, and you also have the Anna Julia Cooper Learning and Liberation Center. I wanted to ask, and you also do the Money for Your Movement. Money for Your Movement. You also the lead organizer, the conference organizer for that. So, I mean, with all those three things, you know, why is this work important for you? Like, maybe you want to talk a little bit about each of them, or one that means the most to you, or.
So I can start with the Money for Our Movements conference. I've learned that from being like a hardcore grassroots organizer, I've learned that I need beginnings and ends. I cannot have things that are wide open. And that's how my activism used to be, is like very lofty. One day we may never see this outcome. And that was really detrimental to my health. And so I started taking on contractual work that had an impact, but had an ending so that I could feel accomplished. And I needed that personally because I had been burnt out and I felt very underappreciated. So I previously had organized or was a conference coordinator for Facing Race. And that's what taught me that you can have a beginning and ends and feel accomplished and still contribute to movement work that's really important. So that's one end of it. And then the other end is something like the Anna Julia Cooper Learning and Liberation Center, which is a project that it's a self-directed education center for adults and children, currently only working with children. And that's lofty. And I work with a number of co-founders, and we've had our doors open almost a year in September. And we have 11 learners, which range from 5 to 12, my son being the oldest, and we're learning in this space. So I feel really grateful that I have children who are like, yeah, Mom, I'll be your experiment for this place of education that pushes back against the current education system and says that, how do you want to learn and what do you want to learn, and how can adults help facilitate that process and ensure that children have agency for the lives that they live? And instead of asking them what they want to be when they grow up, what do you want to be now? And how do we help you reach that now rather than later? And so that satisfies for me this larger, I mean, it was the most radical thing that I've ever contributed to, because it, one, involved my own children as experiments for the most part, but two, it challenged my values, where I really do support the current education system, but because I have the privilege to pull my children out and try something else, I took advantage of that, knowing that there were so many risks attached. There's so many risks attached to it. But I feel very grounded and confident in the women who have built this center and the children who have given us, I would say that our children have given us permission for them to have this kind of experience. And that's really important, because I don't care if you go to college or not. And I do understand that making money is important. But what I do care about is that you are okay with the life that you choose to live. And that's something that I've struggled with a great deal, is how can I just be okay in the moves that I choose to make? So that's that. And then Red Bike and Green was like, I like riding bikes and I wanted to ride bikes with Black people. And it wasn't meant to become politicized. But when I found Red Bike and Green, based out of Oakland, and Jenna Burton, I was like, oh, and you have political context. I can care about the Black community in the ways that I already do, but on bicycle. And I can be an example of possibility that we can. I feel like biking as a Black person is undoing all the things, so many things that like whiteness says we're not supposed to do. The way we move through space and time, using our own power to do so, interrupting white space because they don't expect to see us in this way. And then the platform that I was able to, either that I inherited or that I was able to create, has me speaking in white spaces, and they're not expecting what's coming out of my mouth. They're not expecting me to look the way that I do. They're not expecting even what I'm offering. And it makes them think. And I'm not here to change minds, but I'm here to say that this is an alternative way to think about the way you're holding space, the way you're creating community, the way you're even thinking about biking. And so I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. But then at the same time, Black folks being in their bodies and taking up space is a really beautiful thing. It is like just heart opening to see how community responds to like 40 Black people riding through a community, not in kits though, but like in their everyday clothes, looking like they listen to Outkast and hip hop music and like they drink, whiskey. It's not, it's the way we look is really important to how we're able to influence other people. And so it's been an exciting time to use this project and see it expand in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I do view what you're doing as liberating work, even, not even, but of course, even in all of the work that you're doing, whether it be the co-op that you're doing, the educational co-op, the red, bike, and green, because those are all like great liberation tools. And I think something that I've noticed about Atlanta is that they've been some of the happiest radicals I've ever met. I mean, why is it? You guys, because you guys are talking about important work, you're talking about important things, but you guys seem really happy. I mean, is there like a community of like a supportive community of Black people in Atlanta, more so than maybe other places? I don't know.
So yeah, there's definitely an energy in this city that even though what you see on TV, and no judgment for it, with all the reality shows, that is a real aspect of Black existence here. But there's also this other existence of like radical transparency and people finding their way and authentically finding their tribe. And I found my tribe through trying to grow food. And what we realized is we just have a lot of the same vision and ideas of ownership of our own lives through food, through the way we move through the world, through raising babies together. And pleasure, right? Like being pleasureful in all we do and recognizing that to think that way is privilege, but taking advantage of it because we have that privilege and not letting it fall by the wayside. And it attracts a certain type of person. So by living your authentic life, at least by me living my most authentic life, I've attracted like-minded people. And that's contributed to a beautiful existence here in the city. And when other people see it, they're like, we didn't know this existed, this type of connection existed. And they seek it out themselves, either with us or they're deepening their relationships that they already have. So we become an example or an inspiration for people having authentic relationships, because that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Whenever time I talk to someone from Atlanta, I'm like, I'm gonna move to Atlanta. But I just kind of get back to like the politics of it. A lot of times groups, bicycle groups that are Black or people of color led, they get asked to do certain things like, can you be part of this project? I know there was an incident in Atlanta where somebody asked you to be part of a project and you were kind of like, if we're part of the project, we want to be there from the beginning. I mean, is there, how do you kind of balance that? Can you do us a favor and talk to people? And that, how can we have true diversity, like, within infrastructure and transportation?
Right. And I think that being thought of secondary is unacceptable. And it means that you're not really interested in doing the work that you're talking about. Not even the inclusivity, but like it being community based. If you're not bringing me to the original table, then it's not, and not me, right? But like anybody in general who not even deserves to be there, but ought to be there, then there's a lack of authenticity there. And it might be because you don't know, but you should have did your research first. So I have no problem if I'm approaching a mid-process of saying, yes, it would be beneficial for me to be here, but because I wasn't here from the beginning, I also don't feel like I have the same advantage to be at this table as you are. So I'm all about creating your own table.
Yes.
It's like, I love Solange for saying like, we need a seat at the table, but I'm just also like, we need to create our own tables. It's an and, not a or. So yes, I'm at this table. And what does it look like to create your own table? And that's a lot of hard work. And I think that does contribute to burnout, but it's important to say we need to have our own table. And it's important to say then you all should also pay for us to have our own table because y'all got the resources. Red, Bike, and Green is all volunteer work. We've never been paid. We don't have any grants. We're not bringing any major revenue. We might get a t-shirt sale here or there. So if you're asking us to sit at a table, you need to pay me. I'm valuable. You actually can't do your work as well if you don't have someone like me or Nedra from Civil Bikes at your table. And it's not because we're experts in bicycle or transportation or urban planning, but we're experts in our lived experience of riding a bike and living in the city and being Black and being woman bodied, So, and the city and parts of the city and parts of the people who do this work here are getting have gotten a better understanding of that, but it still falls very, very short.
No, I mean, I agree with you. And I think I love when you said, we have to make our own table. I mean, in addition to, but also too, like you're right. People should be paying you in your experience to be part of this, not just, oh, okay, this volunteer ridiculousness.
Right.
I could go more. You already said it, but I love that you put the community first in your work. Cause I mean, I think a lot of times, especially some of us who are into like I was vegan at one point. I mean, I still am, but now I was a conscious eater. But I had to step away because there was too many times where I couldn't put the community first and kind of be like, I'm like, hey, I'm with the community first,
Right.
and then I'm part of that. So like, I mean, I love that's something that you do. Why is your work from that center?
Because I believe in collectiveness, and I believe we're more powerful as a collective. And it doesn't mean that all Black people are one way. We're not monolithic at all. But I'm trying to find, and I've worked to find the folks that are aligned with the things that I believe. And again, I just really believe when you center the most oppressed communities, when we solve for their problems, then we're solving for everybody's problems. And I'm an independent parent with 2 children, and I do live under the poverty line, but I understand my education gives me privilege to make, some maneuvers in a way that don't necessarily contribute to me actually being impoverished, though I do live under the poverty line. But I don't take that for granted. And so I'm always thinking about the mother who doesn't have a car, who doesn't have access to food in the same way that I do, who's transportation dependent in a way that I'm not, who has more than 2 children. What are her needs? And how can we contribute to those needs being lessened in a collective way? So I'm also part of a CSA where I can buy a box of food that feeds me and my children for 2 weeks for $35, because we're buying in bulk, it reduces the cost, the overhead. And I think about if we could create a bike train that allowed people to get from where I live in the West End of Atlanta to downtown and contributed them to saving money, what does that actually look like? So I think about these things, and not that I'm always solving for them, but I know that if we do solve for them, it changes the way that we're able to live and thrive. And I don't believe that Black people we're not meant to struggle. Our ancestors didn't die for us to struggle. They died for us to thrive. And in 2018, we're not necessarily thriving because of white supremacy and patriarchy and just the oppression that exists that doesn't have to exist. Simply with infrastructure. You know what I'm saying? Infrastructure changes all of this. And if you're not having us at the table, then you don't even understand, or you do understand, and it's being done on purpose. But centering the most oppressed communities is where I'm always going to come from, because not only they're just not being heard. And so I'm not speaking on behalf of them, but I'm bringing those issues to the table so that they can be thought about.
We have one question from the audience, and it says, what would you require to come to the table in the middle of a discussion?
Understanding why we weren't part of the conversation in the beginning, funding, and an open platform, like the willingness to change based on what we're willing to share. So I feel like politicians do it all the time. Oh, you bring us to the table, but you've already made up your mind and you're only tokenizing us. And so just authenticity of like, we don't know how to do this. This is what we've thought about. And we think that your input is really valuable. So we want to listen and see how we can incorporate the things that you're suggesting. And then follow up, because I think a lot of times people come in, they hear, they take, and then there's no follow up with you or the community, but all kind of shit is being done. And so you leave people just kind of waiting in the air to see what's going to happen next, rather than communicating directly that this is what we've come up with, or collectively we've come up with this decision based on the conversations and actions we've had together.
And that's actually really good advice for people. Just because it's kind of like when people come to you, what do you, and it's in the middle of a discussion, what do you say if, kind of like if you want to be authentic, these are the things that we need. So I think that's a really good point. I told people, I'm like, yeah, you got to watch this show because Zahra is going to have all these tools for you. I know in your work, you center women and children, and you're saying, is that because, you center Black women and children? Is that has that always been the case in your work? Or is that something that once you had children in your life, all of a sudden you're like, okay, children are important?
I think in general, it's just Black poor folks were the center of my work. And I've always worked with young people. I definitely think that and I inherited my children, but once I inherited them, it shifted everything because it brought through a slew of different things to experience with children. So, you know, from child-friendly spaces to like child care to how in the world do I bike with children, all became more relevant because I was having some experiences. And again, my experiences were with privilege. So I thought about the folks who didn't have the same kind of privilege that I had.
Yeah. No, that's also important. I mean, it seems like, you know, there's a kind of an educated, formally educated, kind of privilege that sometimes, like in the environmental community, even within the community of color, the Black community that we have, and we kind of forget about our more economically oppressed. Like I'm in New Jersey, and I'm always trying to think like, how can we bring people who are making $10,000 a year, don't have a car, how can we bring them into the conversation? And also too, how can I not, we're just like, you know, you don't want to be the voice for someone whose experience you have no idea.
Exactly.
But I know, you know, something is so, you know, I always ask people, but it's when I'm always talking to people from Atlanta, I always feel like it's a ridiculous question. I always go, you know, how can we get to our communities to be like Wakanda? Like, you know, how can we get, but I always feel like Atlanta is kind of like Black people heaven. So I don't really know, like, what that question always is. Whenever I talk to somebody from Atlanta, I'm like, well, I guess it's kind of already at that point. Atlanta kind of is, I mean, but what are there some issues that are going on in Atlanta that I don't know about?
I mean, yeah, we still have all the same. We're not Wakanda by any means. I think there's a very divided Blackness here. And not that we're not supposed to be in different ways of Blackness, but yeah, poverty is still fucking real. Excuse me. Poverty is still very real here. And gentrification, like right now, full disclosure, I'm sitting at a brewery in the west end of Atlanta, which is a historically Black neighborhood. And every time I come here, I'm challenged because I'm like, it's gentrification. Like it's the ultimate sign of gentrification. And I rode my bike here earlier. However, we deserve these kind of spaces too. And I'm glad that I finally can come to my neighborhood and I don't have to go elsewhere. And so all the issues you're experiencing in every other city exist in Atlanta. And they're very big and expansive, and they go unnoticed because of what we see on TV or because you hear me talking about cooperatives and this and that. But actually, something like a cooperative reduces economic stresses. If we can understand that the tools we have at hand can reduce some of the poverty that exists, if you can reduce living overhead, it means that you get to decide how much you want to work for money. If we can get folks to understand these things, then we can really start to create the lives that we desire for ourselves and create a quote unquote true Wakanda. But yeah, Atlanta's going through the same shit any other city is going. It's just it's unique in the sense that like the way displacement is happening is that you're shipping folks who make the city run out of the city, and there's no transportation for them to actually get to work. So the city, I believe, is going to start to suffer in a way that they're not expecting because of gentrification, because of the way people have been pushed out and actually don't have the means to come in. You still experience racism here, like in a very real way. And it's still the South at the end of the day. And I don't really go outside of Atlanta. Like if I'm leaving Atlanta, I'm leaving the state. And so there's a whole nother Georgia that's happening that, you know, we just elected in the primaries, Stacey Abrams, who might be the first Black woman governor in the entire country. And she's dealing with an entire state, not just in Atlanta. So there's still very real issues that are happening here that are happening in other major cities. And I don't want people to forget that, even though it's a Black Mecca, because pretty soon it might not be a Black Mecca because of the amount of transplants that are coming in, the amount of gentrification or displacement that is occurring that's pushing people out.
Oh, that's just wow. But I mean, you know, we need to hear all sides of that because we hear, you know, you for years we've heard this certain thing about Atlanta. I remember I was even surprised that there were white people in Atlanta, which I know you're probably like, that's ridiculous. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, of course there's white people in Atlanta. That's the whole point. That's why all this stuff happened. I'm like, oh, but I forgot about them. Yeah. But you know, I think, you know, you've said so many great things, but you know, I always like to leave with how can we, you know, what's the last thoughts you want to say, and how can we support you? Like, what do you want us to do? Like, do you want us to, you know, do you have any kind of, I don't know, fundraising thing, anything that you're doing, or bike ride or anything?
So I think that, well, I guess I can speak most easily to supporting me. So I am leaving Red Bike and Green Atlanta. I have put in, this will be my 7th season, and I'm decided to leave. And so you can go to our webpage, www.rbgatl.com, and contribute to it. We need $25,000 for a year to run. And if I can raise that, then that will contribute to being able to pay somebody to do a third of what I've done over the last 6 years. And that would be super helpful. Otherwise, I think if you're showing up in places where we're talking about planning and biking and being a pedestrian, then it's always centering the most oppressed populations. It's not for the person who, gets to decide that, oh, I'm going to change my life and commute to work. I want you to think about your third shift worker. I want you to think about the parent who should be able to bike with their kids to school, walk with their children to school, and not have to make a risky rush across the street because there's no crosswalk with a light in between major blocks. I just want you to think about all parties being able to use and take up space in a way that is healthy and safe, and not just white middle class media folks who are ultimately making these decisions. And then I also want folks to just think about the experience of Black folks that you're seeing portrayed on the news, and have a lot more compassion than I think in general folks tend to have for our lived experiences, and stop discounting them. They're very real lived experiences. They're not one-offs. They're not the extreme. Things are happening to our bodies all too often to be ignored in the ways that they have. And we've always brought, and we've contributed to this country, and we continue to bring value. And without Black bodies in this country, it's not going to be as great as it can be. And so I think always considering that in any aspect of the work that you do will be a great effort. And keep trying, keep trying to do better than you're already doing, and better than that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Zahra. Thank you for coming to Black Kids in Outer Space. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the work that you've done, and we will continue doing. And we want to talk to you about a lot of other stuff in the future. We can't talk about it all in one shot, though.
Sure.
But again, thank you so much, and thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Black Kids in Outer Space. Black Kids in Outer Space. Black Kids in Outer Space. Urban planning, walking, bicycling, and more in our space.